my name is Catherine Dahl. I'm a director of product marketing for Flow. And I could probably stand up here and talk about Flow all day, but what I know everyone here really wants to hear is from our customers. And prepping for this session, Fabian made very clear he too could probably fill all day's agenda talking about Flow. He's an expert and has a tremendous amount of use cases and examples to share with us today. So in this next session, I promise it'll be jam-packed, probably even more jam-packed than this room is right now with all the learnings and knowledge. So I don't want to keep the people standing in the back any longer than necessary, so I'll go ahead and introduce Fabian Tang, our digital workplace engineer user experience at Deloitte. Come on up, Fabian.
Thanks. So starting off with a few words about myself. Well, my name is Fabian Tang, and I've been with Deloitte Germany for 12 years now. And well, who is Deloitte? If you didn't have any contact with us yet or don't know who Deloitte is, then you probably didn't watch the Olympics in Paris this year, which we sponsored. But Deloitte is a leading professional service firm globally. So as like a leader in that space, we also have the DEX vision that we want to provide the best productivity environment possible to all of our employees. At Deloitte Germany, we are part of our global DEX program focused on Nexthink that spans over multiple continents and different countries, like the US or Spain, for example, or our friends in Switzerland. We have around 20,000 endpoints at Deloitte Germany that we have onboarded to Nexthink. And I have a small 3-person team that works with Nexthink, and we are supported by a great Nexthink Accelerate team to help us implement our use cases. Next, I want to kind of take you back in time and start with our DEX journey, how it all began. So in 2019, we first evaluated Nexthink and were looking at the solution of Nexthink v6. But sadly, that initial push had to be cancelled due to COVID impacting all of us. So then, in a way, COVID also helped us implementing Nexthink, because the next time we tried to secure the budget and onboard Nexthink was in 2021 to start a proof of value in June, where our fiscal year starts, and we were able to prove the value by running a short proof of value at our Berlin and Munich offices with around 1,000 endpoints. Then in September, we finally had our final approval by all the compliance teams, the security team, and also our workers' council, which was a struggle, I have to be honest, but we found a way, and if somebody is interested how we managed that, we can also talk later. We really focused on going like a full transparency way. We included them every step of the way. We showed all the abilities with Nexthink, and we managed to show the value for everybody. So in December, we then went live and rolled out the Nexthink collector across around 10,000 endpoints back then. Then our Nexthink journey really started, and finally in March this year we transitioned to Infinity only, and then we acquired Nexthink Flow in June and have been the biggest fans possible since then. So before we had Nexthink Flow, we faced a few challenges, and for us that was the scalability and the complexity with working with remote actions, which required extensive and huge scripts that then again needed a lot of testing, and that really turned out to be a lot of work, probably even more work than we could handle. And we really noticed that also there was a huge requirement for having people that are able to create the scripts and also the complex schedules that are needed to actually put those scripts into production. One big point was also looking at the implementation of Amplify and using remote actions through Amplify was that remote actions alone in most cases didn't really fit our service model for our L1. We couldn't do any kind of fire and forget. In most use cases, there were additional steps to be done to verify that the remediation worked, which led to escalation to L2. So Flow, it was a complete game changer for us because three main topics stood out to us. First, the diagnosis part. With Flow, we are able to split the issue detection from the scheduling and the remote action into small, easy steps that are powered by remote action, but are no longer like one remote action that we send out to a device. So the no-code construction of the logic required for the diagnosis was a huge help. We can do step-by-step analysis and try to capture all different kinds of ways how an issue could be resolved or what could be wrong. Additionally, we have the option to have an easily tailored user interaction within a flow that that can prevent calls to our service desk. So what really helped to move the resources required that we previously had invested into scripting was the modularity, where we could break down our scripts into small thinklets and the logic branching of Flow. So we could create small and universally used remote actions that we can then kind of treat it like a Nexthink library, where we have now a growing number of remote actions that we'll be able to use over and over again for a huge number of different use cases. So the investment is no longer into single big remote actions that we might only use for one specific issue, but we now have a growing number of small remote actions that are available and reusable for all imaginable future use cases. Not to do too much advertising, but also there's like a growing number of remote actions already in the Nexthink library itself. That are designed to be used with Flow, so they are very generic in a way, but really help to build out the logic of any kind of use cases you want to look at. One big part, and I will show you an example for that later, is also the verification. As I mentioned, for example, in L1, it's always important to make sure that the remediation you tried actually worked. It was really important to build that into Nexthink and have that verification at the end that we are not only pushing remote actions to a lot of devices, but we can also be sure that the remediation actually worked. And this also offers us a cushion for L1, for example, where we can make sure that we don't make the situation worse by running remediations that are not needed, but we have a safety net in form of the logic branching that makes sure that only the actions are done that need to be taken and not anything else. And with the ITSM integration that we are currently working on, it's not in place yet, but we will be able to integrate Nexthink into our service now, so we can create incidents for the few cases where the automatic remediations did not work. So we have a great escalation of devices that are facing issues that are not solvable by our automatic scripts. So now I will show you one of our major use cases we created for Flow, and that is the MECM workflow or SCCM workflow, which came up straight out of our incident reporting pretty much. I used to lead a team that was focused on supporting the software center on our Windows devices. So we have been using scripts to reinstall MECM for a long time. But with Flow, we were finally able to build out a logic that really took over all different steps that were required and also make sure that we only run this on the devices that actually need help. So this workflow is scheduled hourly, but has like an 18-hour wait period. For people who are not familiar with that, that means that Nexthink will check every hour if there's new devices coming online. So we run this over all our active devices. But once the workflow has been completed once, it will wait 18 hours to be triggered again. So we pretty much have a daily run of the remote action of the workflow to make sure that all our devices have a working MECM agent. 18 hours instead of 24 hours was something that we found in our testing, because in the edge cases that people, for example, start the device later in the evening and just like check the emails for like 5 minutes and then shut down the device. If we did the scheduling with 24 hours, and the next day the workflow would be running late in the evening and possibly at the end of their workday, so it wouldn't complete either. So with 18 hours, we make sure that the workflow logic moves earlier into the day, so we have a higher completion rate because the workflow will probably be triggered right after they started their workday. And as you can see, it takes between 30 and 90 minutes. This is not Nexthink faults, but it's just MECM is kind of slow, and we really want to make sure that it's working, so we have a lot of wait steps in there. The general layout is that we first check the WMI as like a basic requirement to be working, for MECM to be working. Then we check if the MECM agent is actually installed or if it's not installed. Funnily enough, there seem to be a lot of cases where with an agent upgrade, the only step that was done was the uninstallation step and not the actual installation of the new version. Then we have a location check, and by location I mean of the device and also the connection, so if it's at an office or connected through VPN, but that's also something I will go into on the next slides. The actual interesting part, to us at least, then is the reinstallation, which pretty much uninstalls the possible existing agent, reinstalls it, and then waits for a while for the agent to actually start working. And pictured is only like a tiny fraction of the workflow, which is the actual function check, which is the major selling point for us for Flow, because we are able to, with the wait thinklets, to actually wait on the agent to be fully operational. Then we can push with a remote action the agent to check for software updates, which technically doesn't do anything because none of our packages we deploy through MECM are marked as software updates. But it is, so it won't have any impact on the actual device, but it enables us to then check with an additional remote action if that push was actually successful. So the information gathered by Nexthink shows that the last check for software update was like 5 minutes ago. So then we have the actual confirmation that the MECM agent is ready to go and no longer broken. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a curious check where we look at a date. That is a random, outcome of the remote action checking for when the last check of for software updates was. So when it can't find any information, it will put like the date 0 of the Linux time count in there. So that's a temporary check that we needed to include there, because otherwise we wouldn't have a good results that would show that the agent would actually be working again. So this is the verification part, and now I will jump to the VPN connection check. This was also one of the major features that we really needed before. In a lot of cases, even before we were using Nexthink, we ran into issues that we had remediations planned that needed the device to be connected to our internal network, like have a direct line of sight to an AD controller, for example. So now with Nexthink, we can do an easy branch logic. We have, I don't know if you can see it easily, but we have a logic at the top where we just check after running a remote action to collect all active VPN connections if the IP range belongs to one of our internal networks or if the VPN connection is established. If there's currently no network connection to the Deloitte network, then we run a campaign that will ask the user to connect to the VPN. And then we wait for 15 minutes because we obviously, we don't have a single step, single sign on, or we can't enable the VPN connection through Nexthink yet. We just need the user to actually connect. We do have a loop in the logic, so in the future we will be able to make our flow smaller because we will be able to loop the check for the VPN connection, because after 15 minutes we will check again if there's now a correct connection. And well, if there's a connection, then we will move on with the repair of the MECM agent. But if there's not, the workflow will end with a custom output that says that there was no valid network connection. So this workflow is currently running on all our active devices, and it obviously creates values. So looking at our data, we have around 15,000 active devices daily. And of all of those devices, we have around 5% devices that are facing these issues. So our projection for this year is that we will have around 9,000 total repairs. And with the assumption of 15 minutes time saved on the IT side for the fix and 30 minutes time saved for the employee side, we look at around 7,500 hours saved total. And that's just the part around software availability, so software deployment. But obviously there's also a bigger value, or possibly bigger value, around compliance and security. Well, I guess I'm too German to make any estimates around that. But I can say our security team is a huge fan of Nexthink. We really help to keep the compliance up. Looking into the future, we have a huge roadmap coming up. I've decided to split this into Flow and Nexthink separated. So on the Flow side of things, we are looking at a Windows Update compliance workflow, which is pretty much logic-wise similar to our MECM workflow. So we really want to make sure that devices are on the correct Windows build and have a functioning Windows Update for Business agent on there. Based on that workflow, we are working on a Windows Feature Update Readiness workflow, which we need to obviously migrate all, well, not all our devices, but quite a few devices to Windows 11 in the future. So we want to make sure that those devices are having a functioning Windows Update for Business and also have enough disk space, for example. Another workflow we are currently working on is a network drive migration tool. To go a little bit more into detail, this is needed in the future when we move into modern management, so Intune-based management and Entra ID instead of on-premise AD, because then we will no longer have our login scripts, which currently supply the department-based network drives to our users. So the idea would be that we gather the information on the current device and save that in a folder that gets synced through OneDrive, and then have the same workflow run on the possible new device that will check which network drives are currently connected, and if the backed network drives are not connected, then it will ask the user if he wants to pretty much migrate his network drives. So the last flow is the 2.0 version of the MECM workflow, which for us means that we want to integrate our ServiceNow into it. So the idea is that on failure, we will create an incident to be escalated to L2 to have a manual look at the devices that are not being remediated automatically. We are still thinking about creating incidents on remediation just for tracking of value purposes, but that's still kind of undecided. So on the bigger Nexthink scale for the future, we are looking into the usage of Amplify for L1 team, especially for Mac, because we noticed that there is a bigger value there because of the technology gap between the Windows devices and Mac devices. And we are really lacking the L1 capability to remediate Mac issues because of that technology gap. That also leads into the next point, which is the integration of ServiceNow and Jamf, our management tool for our around 1,000 Mac devices that we use in Germany, where we are looking at an API integration to share, combine, and use information from Jamf into Nexthink. So we want to use the existing data from our modern device management Jamf to then run remote actions based on that information. Then the biggest part for the roadmap is the application experience implementation. So right now we are mostly tracking our desktop applications, which pretty much the reason for that is that when we first onboarded Nexthink, we obviously discussed with our workers' council all the different use cases we have, and we focused strongly on device performance, so application experience and the deployment of the browser extension and possible performance tracking of colleagues using the web browser is obviously a huge red flag for our workers' council. So this is going to be a huge discussion. But obviously there's a lot of value to gain there, especially in a world where we move more and more into SaaS applications. One last small topic, which I can only speculate around because otherwise I feel like somebody from our marketing team comes in and shoots me, is branding. So we're looking into an implementation of a persona, so to say, to run our campaigns around like a few other customers of Nexthink already did. We are still looking into that. Right now we are speaking as Deloitte Technology to our colleagues, but with more and more AI capabilities, we are looking into creating a real persona that will help to interact with our users and create a more personal connection. So yeah, that's from me so far, and thank you for coming.
So Fabian, thank you so much. I will say it's probably easier for you to build a workflow than to work the clicker, but excellent presentation. I know one thing you were most excited about was hearing from our users and answering questions. So I have a mic here, and Ella has a mic as well, if anyone wants to start with their questions. I could start calling on people up. Great, in the front row. Look at me run. I'm moving so fast.
Particularly interested about the Jamf integration. I wondered if you've started on that journey and you've got any hints and tips I can steal already.
Well, yes and no. So I'm honestly kind of still working on that topic with Nexthink because right now there is, as far as I know, no native integration planned. We have a workaround in place, which is not really great, but we build a remote action to do API calls from a specific device to then look up information on the Jamf side to then collect that into Nexthink, which obviously is not a perfect solution, but it's what we have right now. So yeah, we are still kind of looking at, pretty much the Nexthink roadmap, if there's anything planned, and then we are going to decide on what steps we want to take to build our own if possible. Because right now, looking at it, there is middleware required, so you would need to have a third-party tool that does the API calls and pretty much is the connection between Nexthink and Jamf.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Here's another question here.
It's one of the greatest points there was about the MECM repair that you've got, and you mentioned that you've got a loop. Could you just explain to us how you managed to actually get the loop working within the flow? Because that would help us a lot, because we've got an MECM, but
the loop is pretty much not a loop right now. It's just a copy of asking for the VPN connection again, and then like a continuation based on that response. So right now it's not a loop, but as I think in Q1, the loop function of flow would be enabled, and then we can pretty much, hopefully at some point, make the actual flow presentable, because right now it's pretty big.
Yes, yeah, just to clarify, the repeat actions is available in the first release of next year, which will allow for looping and shorten your workflows. So yes. There you go. Okay, Ella. Yep, Ella can give you the mic behind you there.
I was just wondering, with the loop for checking if the MECM client's there and if it's having to take any kind of remediation action, are you noticing any impact to the user? Do they see a degradation in performance of the device while the repair is happening?
No. So we pretty much focused on having no impact at all, and I can say from our testing that we pretty much succeeded. So we, on purpose, used like the trigger for MECM to check for software updates to not actually do anything. So it just check to poke the agent, to talk to the server, and then make it possible for us to check if that actually happened, or like if it failed, or in some cases even if the action to take even is available, which is also something we implemented into the flow, where if the action itself, so triggering the check for software updates, is not even there, so it will fail out with "I can't find this action," then we also just repair the MECM agent.
So you mentioned some sort of out of the box, I guess like the Nexthink library of what's available to you there. I was wondering what your your experience with that was, how much useful there is already out of the box, and whether that's enabling you and your team, or even kind of lowering the technical expertise required to kind of bring useful interactions through this tool.
So there is a lot there already. Like the MECM workflow was based on the library workflow that we then customized. So the basic, the start point was a library workflow, and I think there's only 2 custom remote actions built into the workflow. The rest is out of the box Nexthink remote actions. And since we started working on that workflow, we were kind of early. Since then, there has only been more library content added that is more generalized, I guess. So non-specific remote actions like checking for registry keys, registry key values, stuff like that, that is universal, that you can use for all kinds of different workflows or use cases you have. So there's already quite a lot there. And that also comes back to the point where it really flow changes the problem from a scripting issue into like a logic issue. So it really opens up the ability to have more people working with Nexthink, because you no longer have the requirement to be a script wizard to find a solution, but you can just work on the issue and map out the logic.
Wonderful. Any other questions? All right. Ella's doing all the work.
What was the biggest obstacle in your transformational journey?
Well, to be very honest, our workers' council probably. But that's also on us a little bit. But, well, we started working with Nexthink in September 2021. So back then, even application experience wasn't a feature yet. That came in early 2022. So since then, there have been like a lot and lots of additional features coming in, and all of them need extra approval steps and need to have discussions around what we want to do with the product and how we are going to use it. So that requires a lot of work. And it's also not something that comes natural to tech-oriented people. Luckily, we were able to really show the value, and we, except for just talking to them, there hasn't really been any pushback. We were really able to show the value on all of our ideas we had and all use cases. So it's just a matter of time, I guess, and investment of resources.
You said about your one of your gaps was NQL, training on NQL, or closing that gap, building the flows.
Well, not exactly NQL, but it's more around the scheduling logic of remote actions, for example, if you want to use them proactively. So for us, the challenge was how much of the remediation or logic of the remediations do we have inside of a remote action? What part is part of the schedule? So are you just targeting devices that are currently facing an issue? Or do you want the script to be looking for an issue and then do something? And that's where Flow really came in very handy, because we are able to offload all those parts into the logic of the flow itself, instead of needing to write unneededly complex NQL queries to look at different tables of events or something. But as I said, our MECM workflow just runs on all of our devices, because the logic inside of the flow makes sure that it doesn't do anything it doesn't need to be doing. So that's what I meant with the challenges of scheduling, because it really moves the investment of resources out of the schedule and the remote action into logic of flow.
All right. Well, just looking at the time, and that lunch is after this. We don't want to keep you too much longer, but certainly, once again, Fabian, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.